Chapter 6.
I'm going to try and hold it together throughout this one. 2015 was the worst year of my life. At the end of 2014, I attended a private UK-based ME specialist clinic called Breakspear. For some reason, the treatments had sent my health nosediving, and I became more sick than I'd ever been. I became so weak that I couldn't walk to the bathroom without needing to lie on the floor to recover. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch TV. All I could do there was lie there in pain. It was obvious during this time that I needed to move back home with my mum again. She moved to Cardiff with a new husband, and they had a spare room, which became my tomb for the next 8 months. At this point, I was so weak that the most that I could manage to do a day was to take a shower. The rest of the time I was confined to my bed. I started reacting even more severely to foods, so every single meal had to be blended into soups or broths to avoid negative reactions. Pain constantly shot through my shin bones and through my feet, like splinters. My stomach would gurgle, and the muscles in my body would constantly twitch, spasm, and ache. My body felt drained of every single ounce of life, and I was so tired, but I was too wired to sleep. I was so full of mental fog that reading a single page on a book seemed impossible. The daylight coming in from behind the curtain hurt my eyes. Loud sounds felt overwhelming. All I could do was wait and pray for sleep, knowing that when I woke from it, nothing would change. I wouldn't feel in any way rested, and all the symptoms would persist. This went on and on and on. It was day after day of physical and mental torture. I thought of concentration camps, of prisoners of war being tortured. At least the escape of death seemed likely. During that time I never got breaks. My whole body burned, my brain was on fire, and I had nowhere to hide. In the merciful moments where I could concentrate, I tenaciously trawled the internet, looking for ways out. My research drew me to a procedure called a fecal transplant that was having success managing things like Crohn's disease or colitis. It had also gained success in some select cases of autoimmune conditions like MS too. At the time, I felt like much of my issues were caused by dysbiosis, which means an imbalance in your gut flora. I noticed that all the food intolerances started after a large course of antibiotics for the parasite. I wondered if the parasite had wreaked havoc on my microbiome before I nuked it with antibiotics that worsened it further. Fecal transplants can introduce a whole host of probiotic bacteria into your gut, and it can re-establish a healthy homeostasis. In normal person speak, I wanted to pay to put another person's poop in my butthole. I carried on filming videos from my bed, blogging my experience. I was pretty convinced that during this time I wouldn't be alive much longer, and part of me wanted there to be some kind of document of what I'd been through in hopes that it might help someone later down the line.
And if this illness does kill me, then I want this video. I want somebody who can take notice of this video and do something with it.
I had a fundraiser open to save money for the fecal transplant, which was very slowly creeping up. I needed to save $6,000 in total.
Oh my gosh.
I remember my girlfriend wanting to come and visit, but telling her that I didn't want her to. There are a few reasons for this. One, I was pretty sure I was going to die soon. The day before Joe died, I'd been sat with him at a pub, catching up, playing pool, cracking jokes. I'd often wondered if I'd have been hit less hard by his death if I'd been away at university when it happened. For my girlfriend's sake, I wanted her to have distance from me. I also felt ugly. I felt unlovable. I was unable to communicate, and I didn't want her to see me like that. I watched my mum look thinner and more frail every day that she had to watch her son deteriorate, and I felt immense guilt. My mum would often walk in and find me either crying on the bathroom or kitchen floor, having no energy to get back into bed. She'd often sit with me and massage my feet, which always hurt, and she'd hum melodies to me like she would do when I was a little boy. During this whole time, I hadn't picked up my guitar. I barely had any sunlight touch my skin, and I lost a lot of weight. I was about 130 pounds at my lowest, about 8 or 9 stone, which for someone who is 6'1" is very skinny. My average weight is usually about 168 pounds, 12 stone. Every day the same thing. I'd wake up in pain, eat a meal of blended vegetables and chicken, lie with my eyes closed for hours while the world seemed to spin erratically, and I'd often cry as the bones of my legs felt like they wanted to grow out and burst out of my skin. Despite this, what I didn't know is things were about to get a lot worse.
Oh my God.
Come June, I've been in bed for about 6 months straight. I've regained some energy to leave the house every now and then to go shopping for groceries with my mum, and I've finally reached my target for the fecal transplant, and my mum drove me to the clinic to get the procedure. Everything seemed to go as smoothly as it could for such a bizarre experience. I received a colonic irrigation, which was like a car wash for your colon. Actually feels pretty good. They then proceeded to put someone else's excrement in my behind. They would repeat this process for 5 consecutive days.
Oh my God.
When I got home, I realised I felt a little odd, almost manic, and I was hopeful that this meant my energy was coming back. But it wasn't a nice feeling. As the days progressed, I started to feel an innate sense that something was very wrong. It seemed my immune system was going into some sort of overdrive. My brain was buzzing, and the more time that passed, the more uncomfortable I felt. I remember early one morning, I was lying on the kitchen floor after attempting to get a glass of water. My body hurt so much that I was digging my nails into the laminate flooring, screaming, and my mum ran in and asked me what was wrong. I remember repeating, "I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go," over and over again. I felt myself falling down a deep tunnel in my mind, almost as though my entire soul was tumbling down into an abyss. When I finally crashed to the bottom, I was hit with this immense feeling of stillness and peace. I stopped crying, I sat up, and my mother looked at me, puzzled. I've not felt to this day that sort of serenity that I felt in that moment. I looked around the room and everything seemed to have gained a clarity and quality, but what was most peculiar was the feeling of stillness. There seemed to be some sort of respite from the mental torture and fog in my brain. I still to this day have no explanation for what happened. I looked at my mum, I smiled at her calmly, and I told her that everything was okay now. Her partner Michael came in, and I remember them both looking at me, perplexed. I started speaking fluidly for the first time in months, but it wasn't quite me. I was cracking jokes, being witty. My mum would laugh nervously. I remember feeling as though I was coming up off an ecstasy pill. I felt this underlying feeling of euphoria. I caught myself occasionally erratically snapping my fingers or making whistling noises in between sentences, or staring at some empty part of the room as though there was somebody there, then snapping back to the space and talking to my mum. This feeling of intense euphoria lasted about 48 hours. During this time, I'd adopted some newer strange behaviours. Everything in my room that wasn't parallel bothered me, so I had to make sure it was aligned and facing the same direction. The whistle and the finger click became a new tick, and it started rising in frequency the more time that elapsed. I also noticed that I get stuck on words or sentences when talking to my mum. For example, if I was saying a sentence like, "I'm not sure how I'm feeling today," I would sometimes get stuck on the whole sentence or just a word from it and repeat it about 30 or 40 times before I could move on to the next.
Oh my God.
So I'm not sure how I'm feeling today, feeling today, feeling today, 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 over and over. I can't really explain why, but it's like saying it carved out a safe space for me. After about 2 days, that feeling of peace and euphoria was swapped out for a feeling of immense dread and doom. I felt fear fill my body unlike any fear that I've ever felt. I'd often wake up in the early hours of the morning screaming at the top of my lungs, a torturous scream that would fill the whole house, a scream like my legs were being sawn off. I felt pure terror. My mum would run in and try and calm me down. Sometimes I'd be thrashing, hitting the mattress, pounding the walls. It usually ended up in me exhausting myself and her stroking my head in her lap as I sobbed and repeated the same words over and over again. Everything in these moments terrified me. The compulsion to make everything parallel became a necessity. Whenever I was in the kitchen or car and the dials were facing the wrong way, it taunted me. My mum started taking me to a weekly talk therapist in hopes it would stop me from killing myself. I did catch myself researching the most painless ways to do it. I often daydreamed about death, and it made me feel at peace. At this point, intense paranoid delusions started creeping in. I wondered if what was happening to me was demonic. I don't remember how I got there, but I remember one time speaking on the landline to someone who claimed to be an expert in dark magic. He told me that being around my mum was bad for me. He told me that she was bad. He told me that I needed to do a ritual with black wax candles in order to free myself. I remember ordering black candles from eBay, and when they arrived I had a change of heart, and I decided against doing this dark magic ritual. I fell asleep that night, and I woke up the next day to find the candles totally melted onto the white mantelpiece that they were on. They'd never been lit. I still don't really know for certain if anything of these things happened, but the melted wax was definitely real. I remember picking it off with my nails. There were moments that my rational mind knew that I was hallucinating. Sometimes in the night I would hear perfect string quartet symphonies with no sound source for them to be coming from. I remember one time my mum took me with her to the post office because during this time I'd rarely been left in the house alone. I remember the lady behind the till reaching for some sellotape. As she tugged on the tape, it sounded as though it had been amplified 1,000 times. It was deafeningly loud. I ran out of the store crying and shaking, and I sat in the passenger seat of my mum's car, rocking back and forth, where she found me uncontrollably sobbing, repeating the words, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't, over and over again. My paranoia grew. I boomeranged between thinking I may have been latched onto by some demonic entity, and I became suspicious of even my own family, to thinking I might be part of some sort of twisted experiment, where a group of observers were seeing how far they could push me before I snapped and shattered. My irrational mind concluded that if I start behaving in unexpected ways, I might confuse the people conducting this experiment, and they'd shut it down. I'd sit in my own bed, manically grinning in response to the jolt of pain in my legs. I'd say things to Mum and Michael which made no sense at all. This all seemed to be leading up to a very unusual day. I can't quite recall the details of how it happened because it was quite tricky to tell what was reality and what was not. But from what I remember, I was in the car with my mum, parked outside a supermarket, and I'd put my laptop on the roof of the car while I'd helped her with groceries. I'd forgotten it was there and she drove off.
Oh, no.
It wasn't until about an hour later I noticed and I started panicking. My laptop had on it hundreds of songs from my time in Brighton. It was all I had really to show for my life. I was already in such an emotionally fragile space that losing that felt like some sick, torturous joke. We drove back and searched every place it could be with no luck. As we were driving home, my mum pulled up at a junction and something in me snapped. I got out of the car and I ran away from it. I convinced myself this was still part of the experiment, because what else could explain that sort of luck? Once I got far enough away, I proceeded to strip off all my clothes, and I lay in the middle of a road staring up at the sky, laughing in hysterics. This was the opposite of how one should react to losing their computer, and so it seemed like the perfect way to confuse my observers. With time, the police showed up, as did my mother. By some miracle, she convinced them not to take me in or section me, and by a further miracle, they also relayed to my mum that a dented laptop had been handed in an hour earlier. I took this as meaning my experiment had worked. I eventually snuck off as my mum was talking to them.
No way.
I wandered slowly around this unfamiliar village until I encountered the second angel I would meet in my life, this time in the form of a black homeless man. I'm not sure how we got there, but as I was walking, I turned to my side and a man dressed in tattered grey clothes was walking beside me. He asked me what was wrong, and I explained the best I could the events of the day. I explained that I'd been sick a very long time, that I was tired, so tired, and that I just wanted to be better. The homeless man paused. He put his hand on my shoulders, and he stared into my eyes. His eyes had a light grey tint. They were almost white, and something about his presence made me feel incredibly safe, incredibly still. He smiled, a kind smile, and he said to me, "Everything's going to be okay, Ren." And then he vanished. I hadn't told him my name. I never hallucinated anything after that day. I have no real explanation for that day. I chalk it down to a psychotic episode or stress-induced hallucination, but the events which follow put a lot of questions in my mind. What he said to me was very simple, but also very needed. I realise a lot of people might hear these stories and just presume I'm a bit mad, a bit weird, like I do when people tell me their ghost stories. All I can do is tell you my experience and let you derive your own conclusions from it. Anyway, I got home and I started to obsessively research ways to escape this new seemingly psychotic space I was in. It's a strange thing to describe, but it was like me, Ren, was in the passenger seat of my mind while some other entity was steering the ship. I was watching myself do things like scream at night or repeat words over and over, and I think to myself, damn, that's pretty crazy. But I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Every now and then I had moments of lucidity where I was more in control. I was doing things like stimming. I had night terrors, vocal tics, I'd stutter and I'd stammer. And for me, a lot of that lined up with some sort of transitory or stress-induced autism. I'd known a family with an autistic teenager and some of the behaviours seemed to line up, which led me to a new pathway of online research. I came across this support group for a subset of children with autism called PANDAS, P-A-N-D-A-S. It was believed that these kids had the neurological infection of the Streptococcus bacteria that was causing these autistic-like behaviours. I was presenting with some similar behaviours. These kids would do long courses of antibiotics and their symptoms would diminish or disappear and they'd be seemingly normal children again. I speculated that the fecal transplant introduced a whole host of new bacteria into my gut, but that I didn't have the immune regulation to be able to control it, and it had sent my entire system into some sort of inflammation overdrive. I researched the most effective antibiotic for Streptococcus, one being penicillin, and I convinced my mum to take me to the doctor, where I faked a stomach bug. I lied to him, and I said I'd had similar things in the past, and the penicillin cleared it right up. He reluctantly prescribed me a 2-week course of antibiotics because I was so persistent. I got home and I started the course. Initially I felt fucking awful, somehow even more tired than usual, and then towards the end of the course I noticed a definite shift in my energy and comfort. By the end of the course, my psychotic behaviours had disappeared and my energy felt a lot better. I stayed indefinitely on various herbal antibiotic supplements like oregano oil at this time, having learned that this was also active against certain pathogenic bacteria. Keep in mind also, I'm just going off script right now, keep in mind if I'd have followed the advice of most of the doctors that I'd seen at the time who were talking to me about my psychotic behaviours, I would have probably been put into a mental facility and medicated with medication that I didn't need and would have probably gotten a lot worse. Mm-hmm. So it was very lucky that I took no one tells you that antibiotics can treat psychosis, and these antibiotics did actually treat my psychosis. And I was no stranger to the placebo effect. I'd taken everything, it wasn't placebo. It didn't matter. After about a week, I'd finished the course and some of my more familiar symptoms like fatigue and pain started creeping back again. But that didn't matter, because what this whole experience had taught me was that the origin of my sickness was in fact bacterial and it was pathogenic. The biggest thing it taught me was I could actually do something about it. I was no stranger to the placebo effect after years of trialing different drugs and supplements. This wasn't placebo. I took to the internet again and found a world-renowned specialist over in Brussels who was also leading a lot of the cutting-edge research for ME. I got on the phone and made an appointment. He was booked up for the next 9 months, but that gave me enough time to save money. The antibiotics and new herbs I was taking had also given me a new lease of life, and the hope for a cure made me more determined than ever. I started having enough energy to go on walks, which was huge for me at the time. My dad would drive over to my mum's and we'd go out in the car, and I'd take photos of wildlife on beaches. I was picking up my guitar again after months in bed. I eventually invited my girlfriend over and made the decision to move back to Brighton as soon as I was strong enough to.
Oh, good.
It was around this time that I started working on that album Freckled Angels. I knew that the future tests weren't going to be cheap. I pulled together some old tracks from the days I was working with Sony, and I got hold of Eric and asked his permission to release them, which he graciously granted, so thank you, Eric. I then pulled together some newer material and compiled my first ever album from my bedroom. In those days, I had no real way of promoting myself and no energy to do shows, so it was mostly to be listened to by my friends and family. I named the album Freckled Angels after Joe. Joe was covered head to toe in freckles, and it seemed fitting to dedicate this work to one of the coolest and funniest people I ever knew. Any ounce of energy I did have from my limited reserves, I'd pour into recording that album. It's by no means a work of art, and it's a bit thematically disjointed, but some songs like Crutch or Pocket Full of Pain went a long way to photographing that time. I'ma leave you with a recording of Pocket Full of Pain. Back in those days. Enjoy.
Cool. Jeez.
Da 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 da. Yeah, 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 yeah. I watch the sun when it rises, when it's climbing the sky. I sit here with the pocket full of pain. I've got tears in my juice, in my mind. There's a noose, but my hope makes me cling to the day. I wanna run with the sun and the moon and the stars till I'm running faster than my pain. I wish I could breathe out this fear, this doubt, send it into the Milky Way. I got my finger on the trigger of a Magnum 44, but survival instinct won't let me bleed. I wanna put a bullet straight in my cerebral tissues place, but my index finger won't let me squeeze. I wanna skate down my vein with the blade till the blood runs thicker than the thoughts in my head. But don't ask me why, this is not my goodbye, it's a suicide failure attempt. Dum, 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 dum. I choose life, I choose life, I choose living. Put the bottles and the pills down, I stand up, I breathe with precision. Calm washes over me like a break in the storm. I close my eyes for a minute, then my troubles transform, and I travel deep into the corners of my mind. I remember the first time I felt hopeless. I think I was 5, cause at the hands of this bully, the lessons that I learned is that this world is not so beautiful. Sometimes it can be burnt by the fires of evil that are living inside the common people just like you and like I. We'll all strive to survive, and we all climb to the top over our brothers and sisters, whether we mean to or not. And we get lost in the tide of insecurities and power-seeking fooleries, but happiness don't live inside no jewelleries. In an age of distraction, we would rather tap on our iPhones than stop a war from happening. It's heartbreaking, Satan's patiently waiting for us to mess up big time, so hell on earth will be blatant. So forgive me for wanting to blow my brains out, but I've got a change of heart. It's time for change now, rearrange now, fist in the sky. I say proud, say loud, revolution word on my brain now. It's with the people, yeah, power's with the people. If the people strive for unity, the world it could be equal. You could be the start of the beginning, a dawn of no stress, no troubles, no sinning, just living. So overthrow evil and greed, put aside your distractions, welcome change with me, welcome change with me, welcome change with me, welcome change, welcome change, welcome change with me, welcome change with me, now welcome change with me, now welcome change, welcome change, welcome change with me. Yeah, 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 yeah. And da 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 do.
Before he even had the
He was so young. I know a lot of you renegades have followed him for a very long time, and I can't imagine what it felt like to see him slowly getting better and having the energy to even reach out and do anything on Facebook or YouTube, if that was something that he did in the beginning. He didn't mention it, but I wasn't sure. But nonetheless, just to see this entire journey of this incredible human being who's been so persistent and resilient in trying to find a solution. He's mentioned so many others that were in ME that weren't so fortunate and didn't have the strength, and that's heartbreaking. And I'm glad to see that he did persist. I wish they all would have and could have, and like Randy eventually found some sort of resolution and answer to something that could have been, that's been bothering them for years and decades. But it was a great song. It's very uplifting. It's nice and upbeat. It's nice to see him smile and interact with the camera. And it was just a beautiful song. I've only heard a few songs off of Freckled Angel, and I am looking forward to the rest. So let's continue with Chapter 7.
Before he even had the test results, the doctor in Brussels glanced up from the form he'd asked me to fill out, and he said, "You have Lyme disease. We can run the tests, but I'm certain of it." I'd heard of Lyme in passing during my hours trawling the internet, but I'd never spent long diving into it. It was an extremely rare disease in the UK that you can get from tick bites, so it never really came across my radar. I sat there, puzzled for a moment. I said, can I get better? He said that many people go on to recover, some don't. Right. I wanted to ask him so many questions, but my mind at that moment was totally blank.
That's crazy that the doctor, just looking at his paperwork and hadn't even examining yet, knew exactly what it was. I can't imagine how much of a relief that was to have an actual answer.
I wanted to ask him so many questions, but my mind at that moment was totally blank. The test results eventually came back, sure enough, positive for Lyme and the co-infection Bartonella, along with many other biomarkers which suggested autoimmunity and immune dysfunction. My whole life I'd been waiting for this moment, to have something printed on a piece of paper that showed that I wasn't actually fucking crazy, that I could shove in the faces of anyone who'd made me feel like a hypochondriac or like a head case. But when the moment finally came, I felt numb. It was hard to rejoice. I had the lingering PTSD from the psychotic meltdown the year before, which made it pretty hard to break into the realms of happiness. Instead, I did what I always do. I got home and I took to the internet and I researched the best ways to escape. The summer that I got sick, I spent 2 weeks camping in a small festival in Dorset. One night, me and friends decided to climb a nearby hill to build a bonfire in the woods. On the way there, the fields were full of long grass and deer. 3 people, all my age, who all attended that festival, came down with ME or fibromyalgia-like symptoms over the course of the next year. One was a friend of the family who was shut in a dark room for years because the light would be too intense for him. Before that festival, he was bursting with life, a successful capoeira dancer, reduced to a zombie. Lyme disease seemed to be as much of a medical labyrinth as ME was. On one side, there was a whole host of specialists who believed Lyme bacteria becomes chronic, evades the immune system response, can sometimes evade testing, and leads to debilitating symptoms unless treated with a long course of antibiotics. On the other side were doctors who claimed that Lyme can't persist. It's easily treatable with a 2-week course of doxycycline, and further symptoms following that must be due to an autoimmune response triggered by the Lyme, or perhaps an unrelated, undiscovered cause. I educated myself as best I could on all theories, trawling through research papers on PubMed, conversing people in support groups, often contacting leading Lyme scientists via email or phone to ask them questions. Lyme disease is caused by Borrelia, a spirochete bacteria that causes symptoms like extreme fatigue, confusion, joint pain, heart problems, digestive issues, anxiety, depression, and in extreme cases, hallucinations. So everything was adding up.
Everything you had.
I fell down internet rabbit holes of learning how Borrelia produces outer membrane vesicles, which contain outer surface proteins which can modulate your entire immune response, essentially dampening it for its own survival. It was a truly insidious pathogen, a smart one out of a twisted horror sci-fi. There would be online groups claiming it was created in a lab in Plum Island off America and weaponized. Due to the widespread suffering it seemed to cause, and given how hard it was to treat, it was easy to see how people gravitated towards these sorts of superstitions and speculations. The main thing that made my head swim was the sheer number of treatment options, in part a byproduct of the cognitive dissonance in the medical industry at the time. There were countless antibiotic protocols, herbal protocols, immune system modulating protocols, wackier ones where people would be stinging themselves with bees or swallowing certain helminth parasites to modulate their immune systems. It was a wild west, and I wasn't so naive to be unaware that there were a lot of quacks in that space, selling people snake oil, financially taking advantage of desperation. Like a lot of the medical industry, I despise people and companies who see opportunity to profit from other people's misery. If you're watching this video and you're one of those people, I would highly consider switching your role in the world and being on the right side. One common factor a lot of these protocols seemed to share was you would certainly get a lot worse before you got any better. There was something called the Jarisch-Herxheimer reaction. As you kill off the pathogens in your system, they release biotoxins in your body, which are eventually cleared out by your kidneys and liver. These can cause systemic inflammation, additional fatigue, brain fog, mood swings, pain, flu-like feelings. I was no stranger to these things already, but when they got even worse, it was a mental battle. I sought out as many success stories as I could, and I looked for common threads in the ones of the people who made a full recovery. It seemed like long courses of antibiotics were working for some people, but to do it safely I needed to be in the care of a specialist. The NHS were fucking useless. After multiple appointments, one with an infectious disease specialist, they told me the most they could give me was a couple-week course of doxycycline. I knew that probably wouldn't be enough. They told me chronic Lyme wasn't something that they recognised. I presented them with printouts of much of the research I'd gathered online for the most recent studies, which they dismissed. One of them told me I seemed obsessed, and they asked me if I thought about getting a hobby. I fantasised about dragging him by his tie across his desk and pressing a stapler into his skull. Then I politely got up and left. Doxycycline would lead to improvements for a short time frame, and then my symptoms would come creeping back. I tried many antibiotic and herbal approaches to treat the Lyme without much luck. I tried things like Rife treatment, which is essentially running an electromagnetic pulse through your body in hopes that it will kill the bacteria. I was desperate. It seemed that America took Lyme disease far more seriously than the UK, which made sense as it was far more prominent there. I settled on a doctor called Dr. Jemsak over in Washington, and when I could, I would busk or I'd sell music online to raise money. My girlfriend at the time also ran a fundraiser, and my mum said that she'd also help contribute towards flights. It's not easy being sick and broke, but somehow we made it work. A week before I was due to fly out, something happened which changed my whole life. I've always been a believer in the good that you're putting out in the world coming back to you. Luck, therefore, is more of a karmic consequence. When I was making video blogs, I wasn't doing it to build a following or for any sort of social merit or personal gain. I was doing it because I thought I was going to die. I was doing it because I wanted to feel like I'd left some sort of positive mark on the world, like I'd helped. I remember waking up one morning and going through the comment section of the latest video I'd posted, only to find a message from a British doctor who is running a clinic over in Germany in Los Angeles. He is the third and final angel of this story. He was reaching out to offer to help, and he didn't want anything in return. We exchanged messages and ended up jumping on a video call together. The angel explained that he sympathised with my story. His son was a musician, and at his clinic he'd seen firsthand the countless times the destruction that Lyme disease was causing. He explained his clinic was involved in cutting-edge stem cell procedures and seeing promising results for various autoimmune and Lyme patients. The cost of the procedure was upwards of $25,000, something that I could never afford. But he said that every year he personally selected patients to attend his clinic for free. He would offer me the treatment free of charge. All he wanted me to do was document my experience. It made sense to me that if Borrelia was able to modulate the immune system for its own survival, that an intervention that focused on immunological homeostasis would help. The clinic also offered antibacterial IVs targeting the Lyme and various other treatments intended to build the body back up after years of chronic health complications. I was kind of in shock. When a stranger reaches out and offers something so generous, it's natural to doubt his intentions, but something told me to trust this kind offer. I really had nothing to lose, and as morbid as it sounded, my willingness to die made it easy to throw myself into a more experimental procedure. There was also some security in the fact that he wanted me to document my experience and share it with the world. If it had been more sinister, surely he wouldn't want that sort of exposure. I decided I'd still go to the initial consultation with Dr. Jemsak as I'd raised the money, but I would catch a flight to LA once it was done. Money was still an issue. The entire treatment length was about 6 weeks, and back then I could have never afforded the accommodation for that long. I decided to hop on Facebook, and I found a Lyme support group based in LA. There, I found people going through the treatment at the clinic who were happy to put me up in their guest rooms. Despite all our faults, human beings' ability to empathise, lift up strangers, and collectively solve problems purely because it's the right thing to do is such a beautiful characteristic to carry. I sincerely hope that we can find ways to hold on to our own empathy and humanity as we step into the future. I believe these traits will save us as a species. Survival of the fittest is a myth in a society where we have all our basic needs met. It becomes survival of those willing to cooperate. The time came and I flew out to America with Momoko, keeping me company and keeping an eye out in case my health crashed. I went to the initial consultation in Washington, D.C. They recommended that I get on a minimum of a year-long course of various antibiotics and supplements, some to be rotated. I saw this as my fallback plan if the stem cells didn't work. We then headed to LA. It was summertime, so it was boiling. The clinic was based in Beverly Hills. The juxtaposition of spending most of my life in waiting rooms that were falling apart, feeling like a defective product on a conveyor belt that's being rushed along only to be dismissed, to then go into being in what felt like a 5-star health spa where there seemed to be a genuine care and interest for my well-being, was quite odd. I was greeted enthusiastically by the doctor. He seemed a lot younger than his age. When I mentioned this, he laughed and he said it was the stem cells. As we spoke, I could see his childlike enthusiasm for what they were doing at the clinic. Stem cells were very in vogue at the time. There was also much territory to explore, and the potential of what they could offer harder to treat diseases was incredibly exciting and promising. It was hard not to feel some of that contagious excitement leaking from the doctor. He explained that because I've been sick and misdiagnosed for so long, it wasn't going to be easy. There was no magic fix. At times I might feel like giving up, but I should trust the process. When we first arrived, I was staying on the floor of a young couple's apartment. They were just starting treatment at the clinic. Fontaine was a songwriter and he was an actor. One night he asked me if I liked bikes, and then he took me out on the back of his Harley Davidson and drove at high speed through the hills surrounding LA. It was interesting talking to Fontaine about her experience. I'd found people I could relate to online, but very rarely did I meet people in person whose experience had mirrored my own. She'd also been through the ringer of misdiagnoses, medical dismissal, left to suffer, trying desperately to claw back her own life. I started to realise this problem wasn't localised to the UK. It was global. So many people were going missing and screaming into a void. The first week at the clinic was aimed at building my body back up. I would sit for hours while various vitamins and nutrients were dripped into my body to address any deficiencies that may have occurred from years of being sick. They also offered talk therapy, lymphatic drainage massage, ways to calm your nervous system that would aid healing. I was still having to pinch myself that this was all free. I felt guilty for the people who had to pay. It wasn't easy. Occasionally I'd have an immune reaction to one of the IV drips. I didn't know at the time, but I had mast cell activation syndrome, which meant my body would become highly inflamed in response to many food, vitamins, even things like perfumes or scents from everyday cleaning products could set it off. A year later, while in the German clinic, I would be minutes away from nearly dying after going into anaphylactic shock during an IV drip. A nurse luckily caught me in the nick of time and injected me with an EpiPen. I spent a night in the emergency ward with Germans who couldn't speak a word of English, who put me on an electrolyte drip that made me feel even worse. During the second week in LA, I moved places to stay with another couple. The husband had been a prop and set designer for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. They were extremely generous with their time and space and became almost surrogate parents to me and Momoko. There is an unusual companionship you feel with someone who has faced similar levels of suffering as yourself, like an unspoken bridge of understanding. At the time, I was having difficulties with my girlfriend. I wanted her to come with me to LA, as this felt like a pretty pivotal moment in my life. It was a time where I really just wanted to feel safe, but she couldn't take the time off work. I think I felt a little bit funny about the fact Momoko had made the time and sacrificed her own work and she hadn't. She was being distant with me whenever we spoke on the phone, which frustrated me more and more. We ended up arguing a fair bit. I think this is the beginning of seeds that would soon grow into finding extremely difficult to be in relationships in general. I usually feel pretty unlovable, extremely isolated, very antisocial. I felt alienated, often bitter that most people go through their lives not knowing what it's like to hurt every day. That they didn't appreciate the freedom their bodies allowed them as they should. To be alive and to not hurt is a blessing. To be alive and not hurt is all I want. The day of the stem cell transplant finally arrived, and I was nervous, as you would be getting a giant fucking metal rod shoved into your skin. The doctors offered me an anti-anxiety med, and I was never one to turn down free drugs. With autologous stem cell transplant, they take cells from your own fat, centrifuge them, and then do some magic science shit and then feed them back to you in an IV. To acquire these cells, they have to do liposuction. The issue was I was already skinnier than a shadow on a cloudy day. They would usually take the fat from the stomach, but as I had virtually no body fat, they had to go in through the back near my coccyx. They spent about 20 minutes sawing away at your insides and separating your muscle from fat. Then they inject you with a liquid that breaks it down and they suck it back out, fresh for the stem cell harvest. There's a video of me drugged up and laughing as a needle as big as my forearm gets rammed into my back. I returned home pretty bruised up, but full of hope.
Like they're digging for gold. And so I'm pretty kind of bruised up. I've got these 2 little holes here.
Oh my God.
Where they took the stem cells out and they put them back in my arm. You can't really see on this camera because the light's too much, but I've got more holes in my arm than a Scottish heroin addict.
I'd met people at the clinic who were further along the process than me, who were singing the praises of how much better they felt.
Okay.
For the first 3 months I didn't really notice much, but I was told it would take time. I was already doing somewhat better from the 6 weeks of IVs. It's an unusual psychological space to be teetering on the precipice of hope that your whole life could change. There's a certain tension and a certain excitement that comes with that. I was also having big problems with my girlfriend at the time. I'd found out some things that had really shaken my trust. In retrospect, I should have just walked away then and there, but I held on because part of me blamed myself. In my sickness, I held people at a distance, so I felt like I deserved negative things. We would fight a lot. The health problems added a whole new dimension to something that would be hard for any couple. I couldn't trust that she loved me as much as she said she did because of certain things that I found out. A few months after the transplant, me and her decided to get away from everything and stay with her mother on the south of Spain. One night, we were sat on the grass, looking up at the sky, being surrounded by avocado and lemon trees. It felt like we were in some sort of Eden-like paradise. She asked me to marry her. It was her way of proving that she loved me and would always love me. And I said yes, but I meant no. Even when we went to pick out rings, I just felt scared. I lost the ability to trust love. I don't fully blame her for that. She was an awesome person trying to navigate a complicated situation. I blame my sickness. My sickness was an inseparable from me, and so I blame myself. After about a month of being home, she sat down with me one day and told me she decided to move to Australia for a year. She told me it wouldn't change anything between us. I had my doubts. Despite the additional stress in my life, something amazing was happening. About 4 months after the stem cell transplant, I noticed the desire to leave the house. I noticed more colour in my skin. I joined a gym that was a 3-minute walk from my house. I started working out for the first time in years. Music started pouring back into my life. I was singing more. I was producing more. And this was all leading up to my favourite chapter so far.
Oh, that sounds wavy. Oh, shit. It's like I don't work. No.
Sounds like a chorus effect along with a flanger. Flanger? Oh, he's getting messed up. Oh, so this is the other blind eye. I recall it from the MC sessions, but I haven't seen this one.
No flame to spark my girl. My Nike's laced in dirt. Shit. I feel like I'm treading on my own soul. My headphones only working on the left side, but I try to live the right life. My eyes wide and I strive to stop my demons gripping from the inside. This road is dark and I can't find the batteries for my flashlight. I'm blind-eyed and I'm tired. Red, go. These drugs don't work. The pain, it takes control. Bloodstained shirt. I feel like I'm always being chased by the devil. I try to talk, but I can't seem to get my spoken words right. And I try to keep my stutter alive. And this life, it can be ish, right? Cut you like a flip knife, twist and make you sick, right? And I feel maybe I'll be better.
I love the dancers.
And so I redirect the calls from my phone. I learned so many lessons from depression, but in essence I'm just wishing that these bad thoughts were gone. Sometimes I guess sometimes it's when it's like time is against me. In my mind I kind of mind, yeah, though my mind it tortures me. But I shine, cause when I shine it's like my shines, they set me free. And I rhyme, I shine so bright, these rhymes come out of me. Times I bleed, times I crawl, times I slip, times I fall. Times my back's up against the wall, so hard that the whole building could fall. Times I bruise, times I break, times I'm true, times I'm fake, times I'm when the forward is to open and just swallow me for goodness sake. I think I'm gonna break cause the ache in his face. I'm awake in the world full of days. Blessing the breaks with the breaks they break. And I'm trapping my universe in the relate in the way. Wait at the world, don't wait, we make mistakes when it's all at stake. Top cake, we eat top cake, sometimes no time for double taste. But
that's just the way life goes sometimes.
But I don't wanna end up in the gutter being bad, with my trouble face down in the pocket where the sun don't shine. I'm coming on the back, on the track and the top, and there's nothing no peace. Living with this, I'm packing and I'm praying. Oh Lord, take this pain away.
It's a cool camera angle. Upside down.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so that was a song that me and Ren wrote. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's Ren Makes Music. That's REN Makes Music. I am Sam Tompkins UK. That's Sam TOMPKINS UK. This next song is called Same Old Situation. We wrote this not so long ago. Ren Makes Music. That's it.
That's awesome. I'm always intrigued, first off, how many busking sessions. I know that he said that he was bedridden for many months as he was trying to try different treatments and trying to find even the answers. And I'm curious how much of his fans, when they did find out he was busking, continued to go out, or if it's always somebody new just walking on the street or what have you. It's an amazing thing to be able just to witness, and I'm glad it was all recorded and videoed and put together for the world to see, because they deserve it. Any case, so let's go on to chapter 8.
I was sat in a cafe across from a strange French man in a suit. I had to decide over a 5-minute drink if this was the man that I was going to live with for the next year of my life. A week before, I'd been sat in the same cafe.
I thought we were opening with a song, but it goes very well.
Going to live with for the next year of my life. A week before, I'd been sat in the same cafe with a Polish man. My friend Luke had put me in touch. Me and my girlfriend had decided to move into separate houses in hopes it would fix our crumbling relationship. The guy seemed pretty chill online, and so I'd already agreed to move in with him. This was just a little informal meet before we did. A few minutes in, I instantly regretted everything. He told me a story of how the week before he'd come home drunk, and he'd pissed all over his own living room and was in hysterics about it. I laughed nervously, taking a sip of water as I imagined a future of watching Netflix shows near a carpet that stank of piss. He then went on to tell me a story of how this girl that he'd liked had rejected his advances, so he'd, in his own words, grabbed her by the pussy and she slapped him. He wasn't sure if it was going to work out between them. I was certain it wasn't going to work out between them. I didn't laugh this time. I made an excuse and I left. When I got home, I messaged him, making up a lie that me and my girlfriend had patched things up and she'd be moving with me instead. I had a week to find a new roommate. I was, for all intents and purposes, a loud little bugger. I'd often spend unhealthy amounts of time making beats, so the person that I moved in with needed to be able to tolerate noise. I found this Facebook group called Brighton Bands and Musicians and I posted on it. It went something like this. Hi, I'm a noisy person and I'm looking for another noisy person to live with. Enter the Frenchman. He'd moved from France in hopes of kick-starting his music career. He was working in a restaurant and busking on the streets whenever he had time. He was, for the better part of the word, eccentric, and at first I couldn't quite place him. The bar was set extremely low by the carpet-pissing sex offender though, so the Frenchman could have probably told me he was part of an extreme terrorist organisation and I'd probably said, "Great mate, when can you move in?" The house was only meant for two, but in true cheapskate style we found a third housemate called Tom, who was probably one of the funniest people I've ever met. Tom would go on hour-long rants about how Nicolas Cage is the world's best actor.
I said, put the bunny back in the box.
That's a conversation I would like to have. Because I don't know if I'd agree. Francis Ford Coppola's... That's another story.
And he makes a compelling case too. That Frenchman was Romain Axisa. We'd go on to form a band called The Big Push, and he'd become one of my closest friends. The second week we moved in together, it was his birthday, so me and Tom decided to gaffer tape about 50 baguettes and bunches of garlics to the walls and ceilings to decorate. It was 2006.
In case you don't know what gaffer tape is, it's basically like similar to a black duct tape, but it's not. It doesn't leave as much of a sticky remnants behind its remnants. It's used for filming. You use it to tape the cords down to floors or carpets or ceilings or to poles or what have you. So it's good at staying sticky, but it's fairly easy to get off, just in case you didn't know.
For tape about 50 baguettes and bunches of garlics to the walls and ceilings to decorate. It was 2016 and political correctness hadn't come into full effect. He still didn't think it was very funny. My energy was only improving during this time, although progress was slow. The doctor had recommended I do a second transplant to speed things up. I returned to LA for the second time with my close friend Saran and went through the motions again. Eventually, I'd switched to their sister clinic in Frankfurt, where I entered one of the more unusual periods of my life. The UK has border regulations on certain medications and supplements. Some I shouldn't have been taking back with me. I remember fashioning a hidden compartment in my suitcase where I would smuggle IV bags full of various nutrients and immune modulating drugs over the border. I did this a few times. One drug, Filgrastim, was often given to AIDS or cancer patients with low neutrophil counts. On my tests, my neutrophils were always outside of range on the lower side, so the injections would theoretically raise them. The issue was I was still broke. I don't think the doctor realised how broke. I was meant to pay for private nurse to administer the drips, but I couldn't afford it. So without telling the doctor, I taught myself how to administer an IV watching YouTube tutorial videos.
Oh my gosh.
First, it was very messy. I messed up a lot of veins trying to get the catheter to stay in. There was a lot of blood, but eventually I got the hang of it. I'd be sitting in the living room watching One Punch Man while an IV bag dripped slowly into my veins, and day by day I got stronger and stronger. The issue was I started noticing my food intolerances getting worse. The stem cells had improved my pain, energy, clarity of thought, but it worsened my ability to tolerate food, something I later learned was caused by MCAS or mast cell activation syndrome. Some other stories also started circulating online groups of people getting far worse after the stem cell transplant. I can't say that this didn't shake me. As more time elapsed, I learned of legal cases that were opened against the clinic for malpractice. The clinic in Beverly Hills eventually shut its doors. It was hard to know how to feel about this. The doctor had been my saving grace. He'd pulled me out of a half existence, but I could see where people's frustrations were coming from. As the clinic grew in popularity, I think its resources became stretched and its communication became worse. Nonetheless, that man will always remain the third angel in my tale, and I'll always be grateful. It's hard for me to definitively recommend stem cells. I believe it's a gamble. Some got worse, but they did actually really help me. They didn't cure me, and some of my symptoms got worse, but they allowed me to be an active member of society again. And that was huge for me. A few more months passed. My girlfriend had moved to Australia, but she was being very distant with me and rarely answering calls. She broke up with me on Christmas Day while I was visiting my mum. I took it very badly, but it was also symbolically the end of one chapter and the start of the next. Despite our difficulties, I'm still grateful for the time we shared. There's always two sides to every story, and I don't imagine it was easy being with someone who was tormented by my health problems as I was during the time. I returned back to Brighton, and then I started living. For the first time in years, really living. Me, Romain and Tom would throw parties nearly every night. I didn't drink or do drugs, but I was high on being able to participate. I felt like I was living in Brighton for the first time in my life. I was able to walk around, to take in the city, to live. I also started getting the attention of women. During my teen years, I wasn't the best looking and I was a bit awkward. During my early 20s, I was so sick I rarely went out. So this was new for me, and I threw myself in head first. I realised that I really like pretty girls, and pretty girls apparently like boys who make music. A lot of nights I'd go out by myself around Brighton and end up meeting a whole bunch of beautiful women. One night I ended up breaking into the Hilton Hotel with a girl that I just met. We managed to get onto the roof, but we were chased down the flights of stairs by security. We ended up having sex on the beach at 2 a.m. while the tide came in. The parties we throw would get crazier and crazier. There'd be times where everyone was half naked by the end of the night.
What?
I find myself in strange situations where I was having sex on a living room sofa with 2 girls while some random dude sat smoking a joint on a nearby table.
Oh my gosh.
I noticed this guy who was a friend of Romain's who kept passing out on our sofa. One time he woke up covered in scratches from this Mexican girl who had been telling us stories the night before of all the people she'd stabbed.
Oh,
this guy was Goran Kendall. He sang like Bob Dylan and he looked like he'd fallen out of a punk rock band. I liked him. Me, Romain and Goran were all musicians, and naturally we started jamming together. I remember the first time something clicked. We were at Goran's house with an Australian girl I'd been seeing and her friends. The night before, she'd gotten drunk and tried to strip me naked during an open mic night at the Fiddler's Elbow. I was pretty willing and we both ended up in our...
I know, that's not the purpose, but just the name, the Fiddling Elbow, goes very well with this part of the story.
And tried to strip me naked during an open mic night at the Fiddler's Elbow. I was pretty willing and we both ended up in our underwear being kicked out in fits of laughter. We decided to start working out 3-part harmonies together. We figured out a cover of Octopus's Garden by the Beatles. And not to blow our own horns, but it sounded fucking brilliant. I remember someone walking past the house and hearing from outside, and they started to clap. Eventually, the 3 of us would busk on the streets together. We all busked separately, so it made sense. Back then, I'd occasionally drag a kick and a snare drum out with me in a wheelbarrow, and I'd drum while Goran and Romain played and sang. We would always have people come up to us and they'd ask for our band name, and we never had an answer. We came up with this genius idea of forming a band.
Genius.
One of us said that we should be called the 3 Hats because there was 3 of us and sometimes we wore hats. One of us said, nah, that's shit. Eventually we settled on the Big Push and we got tighter and tighter. As my energy increased, I was able to do more and more. We play about 5 nights a week in various pubs and bars in Brighton for shit money.
Holy cow.
On Saturday we'd get out onto the streets and go busking. There was just one problem. I was proper shit at drumming. The universe eventually provided us with a handsome bearded Irishman and everything fell into place.
Ah, yes, okay.
I loved those boys. We were in truest sense a rock and roll band. We got banned from playing at a few venues because we'd occasionally get carried away and break a bit too many things on stage.
Oh, no.
I got a lot of bills for microphone stands or charges for paint jobs where I'd sprawled the Big Push over the walls in permanent marker pen. Life was a bit like a movie. My ambition at the time wasn't to be in the greatest band of all time or to have any kind of success. I was just so relieved to be alive and play. So every day felt like a victory. Despite this, I was still carrying a lot of symptoms with me. The pain in my legs never stopped. The buzzing in my feet never relented. My vision was still blurry. I'd still get days where I was so foggy that it was hard to communicate. One day after a gig with the Big Push, being overstimulated triggered a very temporary jolt back into psychosis, and I found myself lying on a table in the pub, repeating the same sentence over and over again for about 10 minutes, while surrounded by a very concerned group of onlookers. I came to, in tears, and I quickly left in embarrassment. If I didn't stick to my diet of about 5 different things, I'd be trapped in bed again, but it was okay. I was willing to hurt if it meant I could participate in life again, and I intended to live the fuck out of it. I met this beautiful Spanish girl one night after playing at a local pub, and I fell instantly in love. She had this beautiful blonde curly hair and was wearing dungarees, and I was enamoured with her from the first moment that I saw her, and she didn't make it easy, which made me like her even more. I'd write her poetry, invite her to shows and attempt to be funny. She knew me as the local slut, which didn't really make things very easy, but with time she could see that I genuinely cared about her, and I did, a lot. One time we snuck into a cinema together, and I proceeded to climb onto what I thought was the stage below the screen to put on a show for her as she sat alone in the aisles cheering. What I didn't know was that stage wasn't a stage, it was a 6-foot drop. I confidently put my feet on thin air, and then I fell, smashing my face onto the corner of a railing on the way down, seeing a flash of white light and regaining consciousness with her rolling around in fits of laughter on the floor. She was intelligent, creative, unusual and beautiful. I carried a lot of trauma with me into that relationship. Relationships generally didn't feel safe for me. She was briefly diagnosed with BPD, which later turned out to be a misdiagnosis, and I had major trust issues from my last relationship, which had grown into commitment issues. It was a bit of a recipe for disaster, but we loved each other very intensely and very dysfunctionally until we couldn't. I wish I'd been able to surrender. It was a bit Sid and Nancy, very dramatic to say the least, and I won't get into it for her sake, but it was beautiful, and I loved her very much.
Oh, that's sweet.
It taught me a lot. I learned that the echoes of the past had shaped me into something that I struggled to be. I envied the people who could jump into relationships and feel safe or content. I wondered if it was because I had to watch my mum and dad fighting till their marriage crumbled when I was a kid. If it was because I'd learned as a child that I had to be independent because external love was inconsistent. I wondered if it was because I'd been too late to save Joe. I wondered if it was because I was forced to live most of my adult life in isolation. I wondered if it was to do with my past relationships. I didn't know, but I felt confused and I felt angry with myself. I knew I wanted to surrender to love, to feel truly worthy of it, but every time I tried I felt discontent and unsettled, like the security of love was something I wanted to escape. The thought of ending up in a white picket fence house with my perfect family felt like prison. After 8 long years of being tethered to a body in pain, I wanted to be liberated from any sort of attachment. Any sort of predictability of the future after a life of torturous monotony made my stomach feel like I'd swallowed cinder blocks. When I felt someone's love, I had to fight the urge to run and keep moving, but paradoxically still desperately wanted to be loved. And I loved to love. And I loved her. That discontent was something to stop with me, and it hasn't made relationships easy. Around 2018, I'd reconnect with Sam. He was in his 20s now, so I felt far less weird about hanging out with a teenage boy. During this time, we wrote a few songs together. Blind Eyed, What Went Wrong, and Same Old Situation. All bangers, by the way. It was April, and we were shooting a video for What Went Wrong. We were using my friend Josh's car, and there was a scene where we needed a smashed up bonnet. But it went outside of the budget we had to pay for the video, so me and Sam decided to go busking to raise the money. I promise what follows is the truth. We'd never rehearsed Blind Eyed live before, but while we were out on the street, I turned to him and I asked if we should play it. I started playing the first chord that made sense without even thinking. It started in B minor in this kind of reggae way that was totally different to the original recording. Somehow, it was totally fucking magic. The whole street stopped. Sam was hitting notes and runs that seemed outside of the reach of a mere mortal. Luckily, Sam Perry Falvey, who films the videos, was with us, and he captured the whole thing on camera.
That's awesome.
Before this moment, I kind of surrendered to the fact I probably wouldn't have a career in music again. I was doing it for me. I was doing it to celebrate being alive. The week after the video shoot, me and Sam decided to go busking again because it had felt so good. Someone filmed us covering a version of Vera Hall's Trouble So Hard.
Trouble so hard.
And posted it to a Mexican restaurant page on Facebook. It was the first thing that I'd done since returning to the land of the living that went viral, and it went very viral. It started being shared everywhere by millions of people. 2 weeks after that, another cover of us performing was circulating the internet. That went viral too. By the time we released the busking version of Blind Eyed, the internet went crazy. My social media following started exploding. People like Elton John were talking about us on the radio.
What?
People would fly in from all over the world just to watch us perform on the street. By the end of summer 2018, we were shutting down entire high streets because of the volume of people coming to watch us perform.
Oh my God.
There was something magic about the synergy of me and Sam that stopped people in their tracks. We were being tagged in videos from all over the world of people listening to Blind Eyed. People were listening from war zones, from rocket launch sites, from deep in jungles. It was surreal, and it was incredibly affirming. It was a second chance, and I didn't think I'd get a second chance. The shared out with Sam was special. A lot happened after that. More love, more heartbreak, more health complications, more healing, more setbacks, more parties, more medications, sold out shows, frustrations with the music industry, betrayals, theft, friends lost to addiction. My health would take me on more journeys into foreign countries, #1 albums, awards, a pandemic, meeting idols, making money, losing money. But I'll save all that for another time. It's fitting that this story ends here. Trouble So Hard by Vera Hall has always resonated with me very deeply. She was the daughter of a slave, navigating a hostile 1940s America, something I'll never be able to relate to. The pain and simplicity of the line, "Don't nobody know my troubles but God," was one that seemed universal to all struggles. And it was a line I was always deeply connected to. If there is a God, I want to thank you for giving me the resilience to be able to sit down here and to tell my story today.
Yes.
I hope it's far from over, and I hope that this is just chapter 1. Thank you, everybody, for giving me the space to share my story with you. For everybody still in the dark, trust, hope, and dare to dream that you can get out of it too. I love you all, and thank you for supporting me like you have.
It's remarkable.
Go through it.
I'm glad I got to see these. I could see now why you recommended and not to necessarily do them on a live stream, because they're so detailed and so honest and pure and open. It's an emotional roller coaster, because I knew from all the comments that, he had an illness that had gone on for many, many years that was misdiagnosed. And I can't imagine what something like that would be like, would feel like. And it's so honest for him to just lay it all out there. These are amazing. It's amazing. It's obviously terrible that he went through all of these things and had to deal with all of these things. But I'm just so thankful that he had the courage to continue forward, that he had the courage to believe in himself and that he wasn't going to go out like this. And I know that there were so many times where it was, I can't imagine how daunting it was to just have the strength to continue and to endure the struggle. And it's so fascinating that there was a doctor that did reach out to him and that it gave him hope. I know, based on what others have said, that he still does struggle with this, but at least he knows what the answer, not what the answer is, what the issue was and where it stems from, and that there are hopefully additional steps and stages that he can go through to help continue to progress to be better. I just can't imagine what something like this would be like to live through. And then on top of that, obviously the relationship struggles, the losing two of his greatest friends and enduring that, and then the struggle of the relationships, and then the struggle of losing who you are, because he is a musician at heart, and being able to just have that drive to go busking, to make the money so that he can go and try these other treatments, or so that he can just have enough money to try and take the supplements that he needed to take, or is, going through and trying at that time. It's amazing. He's such a force to be reckoned with, and I'm so glad that he has supporters and friends like all of you. It's fascinating. The whole Reniverse is just fascinating. The people involved are just fascinating. He made the statement that he just wanted, not that he necessarily was going to be musician, but he always had that feeling that he was going to change the world in some way. And it's amazing that he has and continues to do that because of all these. I know these came out over time and they are not very recent, but the fact that he did put them out there to let people know that there are times where you're going to feel down. There are going to be situations and medical conditions that you run into that can't be resolved immediately, and that there are other people out there that struggle like you. And the fact that he just wants people to be happy and humble, and also at the same time aware of some of the things that we perceive in life and some of the corruption. In any case, he's just a fascinating person, and I'm just proud to be around to even be introduced and experience what he has done musically and what he continues to do musically, and how much of a kind person he is. So thank you very much for sticking with this video. I know it is very long, but I wanted to go through and kind of do it all together. I apologize for some of the parts that are clipped because there are commercials during his videos and I wanted to clip those out. So sorry for any of the jarring aspects of those. Thank you so much for listening to Melodic Logic. I hope you do continue to take care of yourself. So until next time, please continue to take care.